We're bringing back our country in many ways, not only financially, and financially we'll be stronger than ever before. I think the markets are going to soar. I want to tell you, there's tremendous optimism out there about our country. And it would be great if the Democrats would do what's right for our country for a change, because they really are there. They've lost their way.
No, I don't know if they think they've lost their way. They're just for American failure because they believe that serves them best. That's a win for them, a loss for all of us, no energy. They think of us as like being like Uganda. They want us to fail. The neo-colonial left looking to pull the plug on electricity and energy in Uganda because they don't have any political power. And the Democrats, like Barack Obama, they're slowing the rise of the oceans. President Trump yesterday in the Oval Office covering all topics, answering all questions. All kinds of great economic news, although the stock market continues to be a bit troublesome, but it'll bounce back. This happened in President Trump's first term, too. The New York Times should be looking into how the Democrats are sabotaging all of this, because that's what they're doing. And now the Lizard King, Chuck Schumer, he is threatening a government shutdown on Friday, which is good timing because the government normally shuts down on Friday afternoon at close of business anyway, and it's closed all weekend long. And but the Lizard King, and boy, is he a Lizard King. What a scaly reptilian that man is, Chuck Schumer. And he's out there yesterday with his tongue hanging out like a cartoon lizard and the scaly reptilian. And he's talking about how I talked about this yesterday. So the Democrats, they want to shut the government down because they know that the filthy, corrupt New York Times and Washington Post and CNN and ABC will all blame the Republicans. Hey, the Republicans are in charge of the House. They passed this ridiculous continuing resolution, and the Democrats, they want to shut down everything because they know that their friends in the press will lie about it, just like the Democrats in the Senate lie about everything because they're pathological liars and all that stuff. So we've got that coming up, and I'm looking forward. Actually, I live in Washington D.C., so I love a good government shutdown. The city is much nicer, more pleasant during a government shutdown. It's less stupid, less hostile, and we got that coming up. So we'll get into that because the reptilians, the Democrat Party, I think that a lot of them might be space aliens from another galaxy. They're on the internet. Have you heard about this? The internet. There are a lot of there are conspiracy theories on the internet about space aliens living among us. You're familiar with this? A lot of space aliens. And if true, I don't believe it's true, but if true, then Chuck Schumer is definitely the Lizard King for those people. We've got President Trump again covering the waterfront yesterday. He even talked about Rosie O'Donnell with the Irish Prime Minister visiting the United States of America. Good stuff. Trump roasts Rosie. Need a big spit for that one. Trump roasts Rosie O'Donnell and her Ireland move. She's moved to Ireland. Ireland, poor Ireland. What did Ireland ever do to us? Now we've inflicted Rosie O'Donnell on them. Big, fat, loud lesbian Rosie. So the View, The View, that's an ABC news program. They pay them all millions and millions of dollars to go on The View to say incredibly ignorant, stupid things that are wrong, naturally, and belligerent and arrogant and stupid, typical Democrat Party jargon. The View's Whoopi Goldberg stops Joy Behar from saying she wants Trump to board an Elon Musk rocket days after one exploded because they love death. They're the left. They're not liberals. They're bloodthirsty goblins from hell. And we'll get into that, too, because it's kind of amusing audio, even though these, the party of the Civil War and the bullwhip and slavery. And when they gave up slavery, they adapted the bullwhip to the Robert Mapplethorpe thing. They love that Robert Mapplethorpe bullwhip story, too. Not everyone remembers that, but the Democrats sure do. They're going to ride it all the way home. Some judge blocks parts of Trump executive order targeting law firm Perkins Coie. I've spoken many times over the years about the Democrat Party law firm in Washington, Perkins Coie. They got all kinds of ties to all kinds of corrupt things, from the Russian Hillary dossier. It's not a dossier. That's just a dressed up French word. What's the French word for prostitute again? Because it might be, is it Perkins Coie? I'm not sure. And the mob, speaking of the hate-filled violent mob, the hate-filled violent mob was outside of a courthouse in New York City yesterday because they're waiting for the terrorists. What is he? A terrorist pimp, I think. He claims to be Palestinian, but he's really Syrian who lives in Algeria, who hates America and the Jews too, and he wants to kill them all, and that makes him a hero of the Democrat Party. And that is Mahmoud Khalil, who is in the United States on a visa that he lied on. He lied on the application for a student visa. Then he lied on the application for his green card. Then he married some Syrian-American woman who sounds like she's a jihadi, too. I know a thing or two about the jihad. And these guys are jihadis, and the Democrats are applauding and fighting for the jihadis. In fact, they dress like jihadis in order to support the jihadis. They put on their Saudi headdresses and their Palestinian headdresses, and they cover themselves up like terrorists. They've got everything but the AK-47s and the suicide vests, which reminds me, actually, President Trump was involved in one of these phony trials in New York City, the Democrat Party trying to lynch their political enemies, which they have a long and storied history of doing. President Trump was in court when a Democrat showed up outside the courthouse in New York and self-immolated, drenched himself in gasoline, set himself on fire, stood up and tried to scream. But, of course, he's a ball of fire now, so you can only scream about half a scream, and then you suck the flames into your lungs, and it scorches the cilia, the little hairs on the interior of your lungs, and then you choke to death and die a couple of days later. And that's, you remember, the Democrats didn't think anything of it because they've got a lot of self-immolation, a lot of suicide attacks. But President Trump on trial, what was that? That was the one where he had the non-disclosure agreement, just like the New York Times has a drawer full of and ABC News has a drawer full of. And, hey, where in the world is Matt Lauer? Speaking of non-disclosure agreements. But if President Trump signs a non-disclosure agreement, then the left tries to put him in a penitentiary for 100 years because they're little fascists. They're a little fascist. Speaking of which, you see this guy in Albany, New York, a Democrat, who's an elected assemblyman in New York. He's a Democrat, of course, from Brooklyn, and he's a jihadi. Boy, is this guy a jihadi. And he is mad. I'm surprised the police didn't shoot him yesterday when he was attacking Tom Homan, screaming at the top of his lungs in support of the jihad and the jihadi, Mahmoud Khalil, because the Democrats, they hate America and the West. And Mahmoud Khalidi, he represents an organization that calls for the extermination of Western civilization and, of course, the Jews, because, the Catholics hate the Protestants and the Protestants hate the Catholics and everybody hates the Jews. The Democrats are the last part of that, that's for sure, because they hate the Catholics and the Protestants and they certainly hate the Jews. But, yeah, this guy self-immolated outside the courthouse in New York while President Trump was in there. That was a remarkable moment. I think we were on the air. That was just last year. And I think we were live on the air when that happened. And like, hey, another Democrat self-immolated, this time at the Trump trial. And he died. He said he stood up there, a ball of fire, just like the ball of fire at the Israeli embassy in Washington and the ball of fire at the Supreme Court in Washington. It was on Earth Day because he was angry, Democrat was, with people putting smoke in the air. So naturally he set himself on fire on the plaza in front of the Supreme Court and killed himself because they've got more suicide attackers than, I got to tell you, so many suicide attacks. We haven't had that many jihad suicide attacks over the last 2 or 3 years in the United States as we've had left-wing suicide attacks. Capitol Hill, New York City subway, Dallas, Black Lives Matter, Baton Rouge, Black Lives Matter, suicide attacks by Democrats, and a bunch of self-immolations. We still don't know what happened to that woman that self-immolated at the Israeli consulate in Atlanta. They really hate the Jews, don't they? But, yeah, man who's self-immolated near Trump trial has died. And the headline at the intelligence service, how it happened. It's like a how-to guide. You got to, hey, how am I going to do this? New York Magazine, and they're giving a how-to on self-immolation because they're really crazy. Trump escalates his attack on Chuck Schumer, who is going to try to shut the government down on Friday, knowing that the news media will all lie for him because that's what they do. And the quote in the headline here, President Trump talking about the Lizard King, Chuck Schumer, quote, "He's not Jewish anymore," end quote. I got to say, there's a lot of that going on in the Democrat Party. You got to betray everything, your nation, your family, your ethnicity, your religion. Never mind all that. He's not Jewish anymore. Trump escalates attack on Chuck Schumer being Palestinian by taking away his religion. And losing my religion. You guys have been singing about losing your religion for decades now. Also, a former actress. She was in a movie called Joe a long time ago. Susan Saranwrap. You know Susan Saranwrap? She used to be an actress. Wasn't she in the Rocky Horror Picture Show or something like that? And fun movie, Peter Boyle movie called Joe. Nobody's seen it except me, but that's okay. Actress and activist. She's an activist. She's moving slower than she used to, though. She's not quite as activist as she used to be. Actress and activist, radical left-wing extremist, brain-damaged, dim-witted, dress-up-and-make-believe girl. Susan Sarandon, and the first in line waiting to enter into the courtroom where Mahmoud Khalil is set to appear. They love the jihad. If you want to murder everybody, then Democrats love you. They think, hey, I'm with them. They want to murder everybody. I think that's probably a good idea. And the Democrats, they've got a guy in New York. Again, this State House guy. His name is Zohran Mamdani. Zohran Mamdani. Turns out he was raised in Uganda. But he's a jihadi. Boy, is this guy a jihadi. He dresses like a jihadi. He's a Muslim. He hates the Jews and he hates everybody. And he's an elected Democrat from Brooklyn to the New York State House. And he's running for mayor of New York City. And when do you hear this guy attacking Tom Homan, the border czar, because he really wants the jihadi released because he wants to kill all the Jews. And the Democrats, they're a genocidal death cult. They're really something, I got to say. Yeah, and the headline is, New York City mayoral candidate confronts border czar. He really had a mental breakdown. He had a complete mental breakdown. That's what he had because they're all mental. And when I say mental, that's kind of an abbreviation of what we're talking about here. But they're really something, I am telling you. And also, speaking of which, a law enforcement friend of mine sent today, Fox News has the story. Illinois Dem lawmaker pushes bill to legalize a tax on police. Once it's a Democrat, she's a woman of color. Could be a man. It's hard to say from here because they're genderless. Let's be clear about that. Illinois Democratic lawmaker pushes bill to legalize a tax on police. We should really pull all the police out of every major city that Democrats run. Just pull them out completely and go full Mad Max on them because I think they'd like it that way. Legalize a tax on police for people having mental health episode. Well, that includes all of them, doesn't it? Isn't every Democrat in the midst of a mental health episode? What else could possibly explain that? But my friend, federal law enforcement, says UFB was his, that's unbelievable, he says, unbelievable. Illinois Democratic lawmaker pushes bill making a tax on police legal. And the Democrats, they're attacking police in New York because they love the jihadi Mahmoud Khalil. They love the jihad. They hate America. They hate civilization. And Khalil, he is a leader in an organization that's calling for the total destruction of Western civilization. They're not on our side. For how long have I been saying this? Boy, are they not on our side. Of course, the Trump administration working toward peace, working toward ending the war between Russia and Ukraine. The Democrats are so close to Putin on the political spectrum that the only people that don't want to end the war are the Democrats and Putin. Once again, in a lubricated bed, a sleeping bag. I'll just call it a sleeping bag. They're amazing. Yeah, and this Democrats, they hate the police. They love the jihad. They hate the Jews, but they hate Christians too. So, that's not It's not really specific bias. They hate almost everyone. Remarkable stuff. Wait till you hear what the Democrats and the liberals in Europe are doing to Uganda. Uganda, a former home of Idi Amin, who was a cannibal. He was a cannibal. The Democrats loved him, too. Hey, how's barbecue doing in Haiti? Yeah, but how one controversial pipeline reveals the state of the global fight over oil. The Washington Post has a propaganda piece on this. They want to leave Ugandans without electricity, without lights, because they're slowing the rise of the oceans as long as you don't turn their lights off. Chris here with a list of things that none of us should trust. The Washington Post, the New York Times, anything on CNN. Here's a list of things that I do trust. The Washington Times. Support real journalism for just $1 a week at washingtontimes.com/Chris. The Democrat Party, they're the jihad, they're anti-capitalist. They hate Africa. You know, the great old joke, one of our brilliant listeners actually recited the joke about a week ago here on the radio show. The wonderful old joke, what did Democrats use to light their homes before candles? Is the joke, right? What did Democrats use to light their homes before candles? And the answer is electricity. Electricity. As the Democrats, they're retrogressive in every possible way. And in Uganda, they're talking about going back to candles because the left-wing colonialists are there to strip them of all known forms of energy because the left is saving the world for themselves. They've got all the electricity they could possibly use, but that's not important now. Let's go to the telephones, Mike. Let's go to John calling from Buffalo, New York. John, you're on the Chris Plante Show.
Good morning, Chris.
Hey, John.
Yeah, so Rachel Maddow, you probably remember this, about 6 months ago, she said, we can't elect Donald Trump because he'll put me in jail. Of course, it's all about her, but shouldn't she go on the air now and say, as much as I hate Trump and I've said about him, at least he hasn't thrown me in jail yet, right?
I think she remains hopeful that she'll still end up in jail. I think she wants to go to a ladies' jail, don't you?
And of course, she hates millionaires and billionaires, even though she's one herself. And if they're smart, when this 100 days ends, they'll just give her walking papers, don't you think?
Well, she, you know, they gotta hang on to her. She's like a saint to them. They killed God, but they want to keep Rachel Maddow alive. You know, she was being paid $30 million a year for doing a show 1 day a week, and they slashed her pay to $25 million a year. And then they started firing people all over the place. She did not offer to give up any of her $25 million a year salary to save any of the jobs at MSNBC because she's a greedy, selfish, millionaire, oligarch capitalist. Now, we know that our government lies to us all the time, just like the Soviet Union lied to the people in the, Soviet days in Soviet Russia. As the Soviet author Elena Gorakova wrote, the rules are simple. They lied to us. We know they're lying to us. They know we know they're lying to us, but they keep lying to us. Soviet author Elena Gorakova during the old days of the USSR before Ronald Reagan won the Cold War and collapsed the slave state that was the USSR. The Democrats love slavery still to this day. They really put up a fight when the Republicans wanted to take their slaves away. But they lie and they lie and they lie. And the British Broadcasting Corporation has a story today. German spy agency, quote, believed COVID likely started in lab. Oh, no kidding. Yeah, those Germans, they're not as unintelligent as... And the Daily Wire has a great story on this, too. Angela Merkel, she was der Chancellor. They should really start calling it something other than Chancellor. What with that whole Hitler thing and the Socialist Workers' Party of Adolf Hitler. Oh, yeah, speaking of that screaming lunatic in New York, he's a socialist, too. He's an Islamist and a socialist and an Islamist. It's the red-green coalition in one insane criminal man. I got that coming up. But back to the Daily Wire. Angela Merkel covered up explosive German intel report blaming Chinese lab for pandemic. Angela Merkel, she covered it up. She lied to everybody about it. She ought to be gassed, honestly. What are you going to do about her? So that's the story. Angela Merkel covered up explosive German intel report blaming Chinese lab for pandemic. Merkel is already facing backlash at home over her failed policies and a memoir that she recently wrote. To the victors on the left, they write their own biographies, and then the New York Times and academia pretend that it's entirely legitimate. It's like, the Joseph Goebbels version of Nazi Germany, and the Democrats get to do that for themselves. Former German Chancellor, I like to say the Deutsche. Former Deutschland Chancellor Angela Merkel allegedly covered up a report from her country's foreign intelligence service that concluded that the likelihood that the coronavirus pandemic originated from a Chinese lab was overwhelming. Couldn't be more obvious to anybody that knows how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. The Bundenkreistag, that's the BND, the German version of the CIA. They got to be serious about stuff, right? Conducted an intelligence gathering operation dubbed Sarema, that concluded that there was an 80 to 95% likelihood that the pandemic originated during a lab accident at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Gee, what are the odds? That's what my intelligence network concluded, too. My intelligence network went about 97 to 98%, much more certain. They tried to blame working-class Chinese people who were forced to get their food at a place they call the wet market. If McDonald's were called the wet market, would you go there? I'm going to stop at the wet market and get the number 2 with a quarter pounder with cheese and the fries and the fountain Coke. That's the number 2, I think, isn't it? Merkel likely made the decision to keep the explosive report secret, at least in part because she did not want to help President Donald Trump's reelection prospects in 2020. She should be gassed. Well, let's face it, throw in a rail car. Hey, Angela, we've got get over here to the forklift. We're going to put you in this train car over here. Time for you to take a little trip and see. Remarkable stuff. Yeah, she didn't want to help Donald Trump, so she lied about 7 million people worldwide that were murdered by the communists. Amazing, amazing people. Yeah, she didn't want to help President Donald Trump's reelection prospect in 2020 when much of the world resisted his well-founded claims that China was responsible for what happened. The report and its cover-up by Angela Merkel. Let's bring her before they got the International Criminal Court. Let's drag her away. We'd have to have some extra big handcuffs, like cow cuffs or something like that. They have cow cuffs? Keep them from crossing train tracks and stuff like that. And put them around your big cow hooves like that. But, the report that Merkel covered up likely to sink her approval numbers even lower as she grapples with facing intense backlash over her disastrous policies that have wreaked havoc on her country and Europe more broadly. The backlash against Merkel hit new levels after she wrote a new memoir hoping to secure her crumbling legacy, the Daily Wire writes. The Wall Street Journal reported, which noted that the effort is backfiring. More than 700-page book was riling up even some of her most ardent supporters. Honestly, they're really upset. In fact, they annexed the Sudetenland. That's how upset they were. They started rolling tanks, lining up along the border with Poland. They're not on the side of anything good. Powerful German state broadcaster ARD titled the headline of their report on her book, Much Pride, Little Self-Reflection. Yeah. And then you can hear them goose-stepping away. It's kind of weird. Merkel's Christian Democratic Party, they're neither Christian nor are they Democratic, blame her directly for the problems that the country is facing, and they say that her memoir is making things worse Even worse, they say, the publication of this unrepentant, self-righteous book at a time of economic and political turmoil like this is hurting her political party, said former senior Merkel official Nico Lange. Nico Lange. I think he might be wanted at The Hague, too. These people. So it turns out that German intelligence concluded it's the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and Merkel, being a communist pig, she said, well, this could help Trump because that's what Trump's been saying. So I'll lie about it and cover up the German intelligence report because I'm a political, what's the French word for prostitute again? Prostitutier. It's probably a French word originally. Just guessing. I don't know for sure. Isn't that amazing? Yes, they're quite something.
Prostituée.
So you got it right there. You got the pronouncer.
Prostituée.
Prostituée. It's at the end. Sounds like there's spitting going. Tui. So you
Prostitute.
Oh,
Prostituée.
hey. Prostituée. Oh, see, we can all learn French today. That's pretty amazing stuff. Wah, wah, wah. I am telling you. And speaking of the Europeans lying and cheating and corrupting American elections, tampering in the American election, for which she should be arrested and put on trial at The Hague, the International Criminal Court, probably be looking at a rail car exit from Germany, as has happened so often in the past, hasn't it? My father had to take some time out of his youth, go over there and machine gun Germans and drop bombs on them because they got out of control again. But that reminds me of the story about the Russians and their war against Ukraine. And it turns out they make so much more ammunition than the United States. They make more ammunition than all of NATO combined, the Russians do. And who are they getting help from, Michael? Who are they getting help from? From the Chinese, from the communists, because Putin is a communist and a KGB guy and a killer. And the Chinese, they'd killed 7 million people with their Wuhan virus. According to all the official statistics, more than 7 million people worldwide from the Wuhan, including more than 1 million people in the United States. And the Democrats could care less because they're not liberals, they're the left. 1 million dead Americans to them just reminds them of their pal, Uncle Joe, Joseph Stalin, who famously said, a single death is a tragedy. 1 million deaths are a statistic. And that's where the Democrat Party is today, where Joseph Stalin was in the 1930s while murdering millions of people, including in Ukraine, by the way, stealing all their crops and starving them to death and everything. But this is the left. The left kills with great alacrity and enthusiasm. They don't care about human life. I've been talking about this for some time. The Washington Post has a number of ridiculous propaganda pieces today. First of all, their front page, they're praising the jihad mob that gathered in front of a courthouse in New York. A courthouse like the one where a Democrat self-immolated and killed himself by setting himself on fire, huge fire, while Donald Trump was on trial there for his phony, that non-disclosure agreement trial, because the left will kill you or try to put you in prison. The Gulag Archipelago, all that good stuff. But there's, and they've got ridiculous stories. EU, Canada, slap retaliatory tariffs onto U.S. goods. Yeah, this will sort itself out, too. And the stock market will sort itself out as well. But here's a story that got our attention this morning. My best girl actually brought it to my attention this morning. Ugandan pipeline carries local hopes, global fears. This is the left making sure that black Africans never have electricity and never have lights to turn on at night, but they live in the dark, and if they're lucky, by candlelight, which again brings us back to the wonderful Democrat Party joke. What did Democrats use to light their homes before candles? And the answer is electricity, because they're retrogressive, kleptocratic, demented people. Backers, so Ugandan pipeline carries local hopes and global fears. I'm not living in fear of a Ugandan pipeline. Backers say oil project will boost a poor nation's economy. Climate activists warn of dangers to planet. So, wait a minute. the tens of millions of people in Uganda, in Africa, where they've already suffered through the socialist, communist, cannibal Idi Amin. Backers say the project will boost a poor nation's economy. The Democrats are like, screw a poor nation. We will strip them of anything and everything that they have. We'll take it and we'll do with it what we wish. And the Washington Post, they type, they're radicals, from a beep hole in Uganda. Uganda was hoping by now to be on the verge of oil production. Instead, thanks to people that call themselves liberals, it's at the center of a global fight because of the left, involving governments, climate activists, left-wing radicals, energy companies, and multinational banks over the future of fossil fuels. It's actually just over the future of energy in Uganda, but the left is going to make sure that Uganda never gets energy. Now, Uganda, and they've got a guy, NJ Ayuk, NJ, who's an executive chairman at the Johannesburg-based Africa Energy Chamber, says it's ground zero for climate politics in the world. That's what NJ Ayuk says out of Cape Town, South Africa. I've been to Cape Town. It's a beautiful place, but people are ruining it. They're lefties. The project is fully constructed, right? If fully constructed, will comprise a T-shaped pipeline network running nearly 1,000 miles. The project is a joint effort between France's Total Energy Colonialism and China's National Offshore Oil Corp. The left is making sure that China takes over by driving the Europeans out. They're going to shame the Europeans into leaving the energy project in Uganda, so they'll be left in the dark for another century, thanks to people that call themselves liberals. It's neo-colonialism. It's neo-enviro-colonialism, and they do it in the name of saving the planet. And what happens is people die in the dark alone because, but what really makes the project stand out 5 years after the start of construction is the scale and success of the opposition. More than 200 environmental and civil society groups, left-wing groups, more than 200 of them, both African and global, have banded together in a coalition called Stop EACOP, E-A-C-O-P, Stop EACOP. I told you a story yesterday in Brazil. They're building a 4-lane highway 8 miles long through the rainforest so they can have an environmental summit at the end of the road because they're all mentally ill. Pretty amazing stuff. But this goes on, and many involved in the project say that the Trump-era backlash against climate goals will play in their favor. Sure. Although the pipeline is not fully financed, Ugandan authorities say that they were working to line up banks in China and the Middle East because the left has killed the cooperation of the banks in France and in Great Britain because they want Africans to live in squalor and live in the dark. And they do this in the name of liberalism, of course. Now, buried in the story, way in here, they got this thing. The people who lecture us, they've been exploiting the resources here for 100 years, says Sekitawa. So when I find a person in New York who grew up with power, meaning electricity, has a refrigerator, and he says, stop EACOP to me, he's telling my 45 million brothers that they can continue reading by a candle. And that's what the Washington Post says. And that's where what did Democrats use to light their homes before candles? The answer is electricity, because they're retrogressive primitives, and they would leave Africa, Uganda and Africa more broadly, scrod for centuries to come in the name of something. But, of course, they've got their 85-inch 4K TVs and their private jets and more than 200 left-wing organizations opposing electricity for Uganda, energy for Uganda, because they're eco-colonialist terrorists. And they're racist, too, just by the way. And in the name of liberalism, keep that in mind at all times. We're at 888-630-9625. Yeah, my best girl was reading aloud to me this morning from the Washington Post about the Democrats denying electricity to 45 million Ugandans. And she got to the point where he's telling 45 million brothers that they can continue reading with a candle. I was like, oh, well, that brings us to the joke, because it's a great joke about the neo-eco-colonial left. What did the Democrats use to light their homes before candles? And the answer is electricity. It's a great joke, classic composition for a joke, too. Because, one-word punchline is key. One line to set up the one-word punchline. Classic structure of an American joke. All right, let's take a phone call, Michael. I've got President Trump coming out, and the jihadis. They love the jihad, the violent mob in the street again. In Illinois, they want to make it legal to attack cops, violently attack cops, which the Democrats do every day because they're all criminals. All right, almost all of them. Let's go to Jason, calling from Kensington, Maryland. Jason.
Hey, g'day, Chris. How you going, mate?
Very well, very well. What do you know?
Much this whole global agenda of climate change. It's sort of funny to watch because in Australia we recently had a big cyclone, which, is common for this time of year. This one kind of went a little bit further south, closer to where I live, but so they saw the opportunity to make sure that they pushed the climate change agenda straight away, saying that these things are going further south because of the heating oceans, and then they found crocodiles are moving further south. So funny thing is, people in Australia started getting blow-up crocodiles and logs and putting them on the side of the road and putting them in waterways and taking photos and saying, yep, it's true, we found a crocodile in our backyard, 500 miles south of where it's supposed to be. It's so funny to watch. But
everybody's mocking them. Australians are mocking them.
So it's sort of like they're slowly waking up that this is basically a whole global agenda that they're pushing, and they're all reading from the same sheet music pretty much.
They're all authoritarian. So you're having you had a cyclone. What do we call cyclones here?
The hurricanes, but the winds go around the other way. So
go around the other way. See, it's a tricky thing. I think you guys should just talk American. Just call them hurricanes like normal people, for crying out loud.